no 8 or 9-year-old kid is going to voluntarily support Rayo Vallecano unless they're from Vallecas. And we'll always know that at the end of the day, we may not be the most glamorous club. We may not be the most glamorous neighborhood. We may not have a trophy cabinet that's bulging, but we have got a strong set of principles, a strong set of values, and we will defend those fervently.
Yes. Welcome back. If you are one of those that check their podcast feed every Monday around noon Eastern Standard Time here, or around 5 in England or 6 in the rest of Western Europe, then I want to apologize, not like deeply and regretfully, but I am running a few hours late today. We're on fall break here, which really is only a glorified long weekend. And I've been away for that weekend. Normally I edit episodes with the interviews I recorded in advance, but not this week, which allows me to spend this free Monday with ska music and soccer. Let me explain. We're taking a trip to Vallecas today, a working class neighborhood, formerly a poor suburb of the Spanish capital of Madrid. La Liga, the Spanish First League, holds global appeal. That is chiefly due to its two dominators, who we're not going to name today, who have a massive global following. However, there's wonderful and many layered stories of politics and local pride and past glories and regional conflict until today below that shiny surface of Spanish football. And we'll look very close at one of those stories today, that of Rayo Vallecano. The Lightning Bolt of Vallecas is what that name literally means. Currently a very good 8th in La Liga, normally an elevator club, kind of bobbing up and down between 1st and 2nd and sometimes even the 3rd league. But the club is also the inspiration for a good few ska and punk songs from their neighborhood. So, not really great on the field moments here, but plenty off the field. And Paul Reidy is the perfect person to explain to English speakers the appeal of this strange 3rd club in Madrid that doesn't really want to be a club for the whole city. Paul, easy to guess from the name, is not a native to Madrid or to Vallecas, but I'll let him introduce himself. And yes, James Rodriguez currently plays for Rayo, but that's not what we get goosebumps about around here. Graz Derby in the Austrian League is on this weekend. If you haven't, go back and listen to episode 25 if you want to know about the rivalry that shaped me and my early football world. What else is new? Jurgen Klopp let himself be dragged down to Red Bull's level, and it was another boring national team break for me. Speaking of boring, please take a few seconds now and follow or give a star rating if you haven't done it yet. You know, it helps, and it's better than having to listen to ads or climb a paywall. Please help make this podcast a bit more visible to those few and chosen people like you who get a kick out of what we do here. And if you don't rate the assistant professor of football highly, then don't do a 1-star rating, but send this episode on to your enemy instead. Off to Vallecas. Welcome, Paul, and greetings to Madrid.
Cheers, Philip. Thank you for having me on.
I'm glad it's finally worked. We've been in touch for a while over the summer. Now the season has started. And at one time you said, no, you actually have to go to a game. I don't know what kind of excuse that is to go to a soccer game. Is it
terrible?
Here we are. Greetings. And before we dive into the club and the culture that is Rayo Vallecano, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you end up in Madrid? How did you end up with Rayo? Sure. And what's your football biography?
Okay, well, I moved to Madrid in 2003, and my move here had nothing to do with football or nothing to do with sports. In a previous lifetime, I worked in the music industry, and I used to work for Universal Music. And it being a multi-international company, had offices around the world. And my girlfriend at the time was Spanish, and I was in London at the time. I'm originally from Ireland, and she was kind of tolerating London without really enjoying it. So it was inevitable if the relationship was to move forward, then Madrid was the inevitable destination. So I managed to get a move across to Madrid with Universal, and my first ever trip to Madrid was in 1993, and that's when I first discovered Rayo Vallecano. And we're talking 1993, so pre-internet, pre-satellite television. And I think most football fans outside of Spain would have been aware of Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, maybe Sevilla and Valencia. But Rayo Vallecano were an unknown quantity. I used to remember seeing their name in World Soccer magazine, which was kind of like this little kind of insight into what was happening, apart from the big teams that were making European competition year in, year out.
I remember as a child the badge of Rayo with the very distinctive ray, because an Austrian forward played there for a little bit, Tony Polster, and that would be around roughly the time you moved there. So it's just in childhood back, there's some memory of Rayo without knowing anything about the club as well. Yeah.
So I was here for a weekend in the 90s, and a friend of mine, we were talking about, he lived here at the time, and he was talking about football in Madrid and the clubs, and he talked about this team called Rayo Vallecano, and he said they were like a yo-yo club, and they had the distinctive shirt with the red sash on the shirt, which was kind of inspired by River Plate. And he just painted this picture, and it just got me intrigued. It was just like an underdog club from this kind of working class neighborhood in the south east of Madrid. And then later on that evening, I was in a shop called Galerías Preciados, which doesn't exist anymore. And this was in May, so it was the end of the season, and they had the Rayo jersey on sale. And I was at Pesetas at the time too, so before the euro had even begun to exist. And I remember buying the jersey. And to cut a long story short, we were supposed to fly back to London I was over there playing soccer with the team, and three of us missed the flight. And we were like, shit, we've got to spend the night in Madrid. We've got no clean clothes. And I was like, I bought this jersey. I'm going to put this on, and I'll wear this to hang around Madrid for the night. So we went into bars, obviously knowing Madrid was a kind of like, a 24-hour city, if you like. And the reaction from the people, you have to remember the time and place. Now, this was before the replica jersey thing was a big thing, where people were wearing, Madrid shirts, Barca shirts, Inter Milan, Juve, whatever shirt. People didn't go around wearing replica shirts, and nobody went around wearing a Rayo Vallecano replica shirt. So I was getting people literally coming up to me in bars, speaking to me in Spanish, which I didn't speak at the time, and buying me drinks. And we're just, the reaction, honestly, I mean, it was an incredible reaction of kind of like bewilderment and just like, what is going on here? And I remember thinking, hang on, this shirt, there's something more than this shirt. This reaction is not normal. So every bar we went into, literally, people were striking up conversations, wanting to know why this mad Irish guy is wearing a Rayo Vallecano jersey in the early 90s. So that was my first kind of like port of call with Rayo. And then the second thing was like, okay, I need to go and watch these guys play. So when I was back in Madrid for maybe a year or two later, they were at home on a 12 o'clock kickoff. And I can't remember the first game. It was either against Real Sociedad or Recreativo de Huelva, but I do remember they won 4-0. And I bought a ticket in the Fondo. There's only people who know Rayo's ground. It's a 3-sided ground. So you've got two main stands, a Fondo, which is like a stand behind the goal, and then the other side is just advertising hoardings. So I stood in there with the fans. And again, the fans were just, this foreign guy. And this is before ground hopping was a big thing. And, you get a lot of football tourism now. And people were just so warm, and they were like sharing wine with me at halftime, and they were, trying to engage in conversation. And again, just curiosity about what is this guy doing here? Why is he here? Why is he watching Rayo? He should be at the Bernabeu. He should be at the Calderón watching the big clubs. So from that moment on, which was like the middle of the 90s, I was hooked. And my girlfriend, who subsequently became my wife, we used to have this kind of long distance relationship where I'd come over at weekends, and I'd always make sure that my weekend, I didn't tell her this, by the way, this is revelation, that I always made sure that there was a Rayo home game on when I said, okay, I can go over that weekend, and I'd be down in Vallecas, and I love the experience, and I felt so at home there, Philip. And this is like I say, in a period of time before you saw a lot of foreigners watching football around Europe, which is a big thing now. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was kind of like, how I kind of got into Rayo. And at that time, I didn't really know too much about the politics of Vallecas, the politics of the fans. I just liked it because it felt good. The atmosphere was good. It was good fun. And yeah, I mean, the whole thing was positive.
Thank you also to the shout out of how different things were in terms of being in a different city, coming to know football teams from different countries coming to see those teams claiming you. The abundance of tourism accounts and ground hopping blogs today make it almost hard to imagine of how big of a cultural gap you'd have to cross in the 90s to visit another stand like this. You mentioned a neighborhood too. Yeah. I don't know if your then girlfriend lived there, but Vallecas as a distinct place were you attracted to the place early on as well?
We live about 4 kilometers from Vallecas.
Okay.
So in Rayo, when they say support your local club, I am supporting my local club. Rayo are geographically the closest club to where we live. I mean, Vallecas is a unique place in terms of it's like a kind of it's part of Madrid, but it's not part of Madrid. And people from Vallecas are very proud of having their own identity. And they will say, oh, I'm from Vallecas. I'm not from Madrid, even though it ultimately is a suburb of Madrid. And Madrid has expanded and expanded. And you've got suburbs now like Fuenlabrada, Alcorcón, Getafe. I mean, they're essentially parts of Madrid, but these were, small towns that were satellite towns. But as Madrid has expanded, Madrid has kind of consumed them.
Do you know how long Vallecas was its own kind of suburb thing? Like, since when is it discernibly a part of the city in terms of the cityscape? And
again, as I said at the outset, I am terrible for dates, but I do know is that back in maybe the post-Civil War, so the 40s and 50s, Vallecas was not connected to Madrid. It was seen as somewhere that's outside of Madrid, and it was a place where a lot of immigration internally from Spain. So people from Andalusia, people from Extremadura would move to this capital city, and it was an affordable place to live at that point in time. It's still reasonably affordable, but obviously less so as it's become more integrated in the city. And it was always a kind of a bastion of resistance. It's the only place I think in Madrid, the only suburb of Madrid that's never been governed by the right-wing Partido Popular.
Uh-huh.
It's always been a pocket of resistance you hear stories about in the 70s when Franco was still in power, how by there was a lot of, the students at the time, there was a lot of kind of tension in the air about the dictatorship, and how Vallecas was always kind of this nucleus of hostility, and it was always kind of like fermenting dissatisfaction with the regime. So it's always been seen by a lot of other people in Madrid as it's like a little satellite of kind of resistance. And you still have that element today. I mean, there's a thing called the Puente de Vallecas, which is a kind of a bridge which kind of breaks one area of Madrid, the Retiro district, into Vallecas, and the vibe changes. You walk across that bridge, and you're in Vallecas, and straight away there's a kind of a feel of it's very different. And the political messages on the wall, whether it's graffiti or whether it's posters, changes, and it's all about kind of protests for this, protests against cuts in social health, et cetera, et cetera. So you feel like you're in a different entorno, as they say in Spanish, a different kind of atmosphere. The vibe is different.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of so many neighborhoods in other cities with somewhat of a comparable history. Has it gentrified? Is it gentrifying? Is it changing?
I think we're seeing it. We're on the first rung of the ladder of gentrification.
Okay.
And there's definitely there's a groundswell from local people that they will do their best to resist it. And one thing people in Vallecas do very well is resist outside kind of forces coming in or whatever. And but I think, Madrid is changing as a city. I mean, every big capital city in Europe is changing. And I think the pandemic has offered people the opportunity to travel and work remotely, this is not a bad thing. I mean, this is, shared experiences and things like that. But when it does affect on property prices and local people being unable to get a foothold on the property ladder, that's I think when it becomes a problem. And you're seeing issues and protests in the Canary Islands and in Mallorca, Barcelona. Barcelona is hugely impacted by tourism, and there's a lot of local resistance. There's actually graffiti there.
Shooting with water guns on tourists. Wasn't that Barcelona where that happened recently?
Yeah, and I've seen graffiti with refugees welcome, tourists go home. I mean, that's the sentiment from a lot of the people. I don't know, but certainly it's all about a balance, I guess, Philip, as everything in life is to try and get the balance. Because if you have a family who work in the tourism in sector, you'll want tourism. But it's all about trying to strike this balance and to try and avoid these kind of speculative property investors who just want to suck up these properties and just sell them out as Airbnbs or sell them out as rental homes, on short-term things. And it's something that the Spanish government, and I think governments in Italy and tourist areas are having to contend with now.
Yeah. Austria too, issue as well. You mentioned the murals in Vallecas. I'm thinking of the, I assume, famous football mural of the dad in the Rayo shirt and the kid over the shoulders walking to the stadium. I'm assuming.
The kid, by the way, who's a little girl.
The kid is a little girl. That's right. Yeah,
which I think is a bit of a nuance that isn't certainly not lost on a lot of people, because I think that also fits into the message from Vallecas that, and certainly obviously the mural was created by Bucaneros, who are the ultra group.
Yes, we'll get to them. Yeah.
Get to them, and they're, within Bucaneros, there's a lot of very fertile creativity, and I think the guys who are involved in the graffitis and the murals, that was a masterclass. That stroke of putting the kid on the back being a little girl, I thought was a work of genius.
Yeah, it's a little ponytail.
Yeah,
in fact, yeah, that mural. And what it's trying to signify is what I'm trying to get at too. We've talked about the neighborhood already. Out of that neighborhood emerges a club when it's still a suburb, and go figure, starts playing in the same outfit as River Plate in Argentina. So what should we need to know about the origin story here and how it fits into this place of all places? Because we're in Madrid and we're not talking about the big clubs. What's the story of this one?
Again, I think this is good. Again, I'm on thin ice again with data, but I think we're talking about the 40s when River Plate were on a tour of Europe, and I think they donated or they gave or whatever. Anyway, a set of River Plate kits fell into the hands of the kit man at Rayo Vallecano at the time. And at that previous time, Rayo used to wear white, and black socks. So it was just a simple question of they kind of adopted the River Plate jersey.
They exchanged Sturm Graz colors for our city rivals' colors, basically.
So from the 40s onwards, that's been the color. I mean, and the sash has become very identifiable. And I remember when I first got into the Rayo thing, it reminded me of the Peru team for the '78 World Cup with Kubilas. And that was my first reference as a kid, was seeing Peru wear this kind of this iconic jersey, if you like. I mean, there's a few jerseys in world football, like the Boca Juniors kit, the Glasgow Celtic kit, the Ajax kit. They're kind of unique, and you see them, and straight away you think of one club. And the white with the red, inevitably River Plate is the biggest club in the world who wears that jersey. But my reference point at the time was the Peru World Cup team from '78. But yeah, now the jersey's become iconic, and the kind of the franja, as it's called, the vertical, the diagonal stripe, is kind of part of Rayo's folklore. And the Franjirojos is the name of the Rayo fans, kind of red stripes, if you like. It's a very poor translation, but and it would sound so much better in Spanish.
Yeah,
but yeah. I mean, the kit is iconic with Rayo, and it's kind of you think of Rayo, you think of the kit, you think of the neighborhood.
You do, and it's so. Where's the connection in between the kit, the stripe, and the arrow in the club emblem and name? Is that like a natural coming together of things, or was that added later?
No, the word Rayo in lightning the word Rayo in Spanish means lightning.
Yeah.
So on the club badge, it's a lightning bolt. If you see, it's kind of like a strike of lightning.
But it looks similar to the sash on the shirt. Which one was first? Do you know?
No, the badge was the first, because the old club badge always had the lightning bolt, because it was always Rayo Vallecano. The lightning bolt of Vallecas is literally what how Rayo Vallecano translates.
Yeah.
So the bolt was always there. So I think when the shirt came along, somebody at the time obviously thought, hang on, we've got the bolt,
perfect sense.
The shirt, it fits perfectly. So yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
it stuck then in the 40s, and it's always been the home jersey.
Is there anything left of the River Plate connection?
No, it's funny actually. You do see a lot of River Plate jerseys down there, along with the likes of St. Pauli jerseys and Glasgow Celtic. They're the kind of the main jerseys that, and obviously Columbia jerseys at the moment are the ones that dominate the stands. And it's funny, River Plate have a very strong affinity and a connection as a club with Torino in Italy. But there's never been this kind of reaching out and kind of establishing a kind of a connection where River would come over and play a friendly against Rayo. It's a natural fit, but nobody has taken, and certainly our president is not, he's certainly not the one to make that step to try and kind of forge these clubs together. Outside of the jersey, there's no affinity. I mean, occasionally when you wear a Rayo jersey, you do get, a nod of approval from River Plate fans if you see them. And obviously when River Plate were here for the Copa Libertadores final that was played in Madrid, you saw a lot of Rayo fans going around, and there's a natural synergy there between the River Plate with the jersey. The jersey is the only common denominator, Philip, to be honest.
Yeah, and the socio-economic founding background of the two clubs seems a bit different too. So I was wondering if there's still a connection there. When Rayo gets founded, Real and Atletico and what these clubs would become are around. Is Rayo a regional club for the first decades of its history, or does it become the number 3 in the region pretty quickly?
It becomes number 3 simply because there was only really 3 big clubs at the time. I mean, Rayo was always a yo-yo club traditionally. It was always, in its first years played in lower leagues. And it wasn't really until like the 70s before they started contending and starting to, move into the top flight. But even since the 60s, 70s, they have traditionally been a yo-yo club, and they've spent most of their life actually in the second division. And they're one of these clubs where they're kind of too big for the second division, but maybe not big enough for the first division.
Yeah.
Traditionally, I mean, I'm talking about over the last, say, quarter of a century. And they've also had a spell in the third tier of Spanish football. When I moved here in 2003, saw Rayo getting relegated from the first to the second, and then into the Segunda B, which is like the third tier. And they had 3 years, basically playing regional clubs, semi-professional clubs. You'd go to games and there'd be maybe 4,000, 5,000 fans at the stadium. And this is the hardcore social mass of the Rayo fan base. Every home game now is sold out because they're playing in the top flight. But when you strip all the kind of the fancy top flight glamour away, Rayo's social mass is that it's 5,000, 6,000 fans
who are, I'm guessing, mostly local, or is there such a thing where you grow up in Madrid and at school you pick Real or Atletico, or if you're a hipster, you pick Rayo? Does the club have citywide appeal, or does it remain very local in its following?
Yeah, I mean, you don't get 8-year-old hipsters, or 8-year-old kids don't aspire to be hipsters. Like 8-year-old kids want 8-year-old kids want to conform. My 2 kids are a perfect example. I have 2 kids, a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. The oldest one is an Atletico Madrid fan, and the younger one is a Real Madrid fan.
Okay.
Because when they were at school, a classroom can be divided probably 60-40, with 60 being Real Madrid fans and then the other 40 being Atletico Madrid because of their parents, or because that's the kind of the general split here in Madrid. Occasionally you may get a kid who's an Athletic Bilbao fan or a Sporting Gijón fan because his dad are from there and he will support that club. No 8 or 9-year-old kid who is going to voluntarily support Rayo Vallecano unless they're from Vallecas, unless they're from the area, unless they're they live within that kind of community. I think that's where you'll get the Rayo fans. And if you go to the schools in Vallecas, it's going to be maybe the split will be 60% in terms of Rayo, and then the rest will be further down the line. But it's curious actually. My younger kid is a Real Madrid fan, and when you're getting into football when you're 7 and 8, you're going to support the teams who win. You're going to support the teams who've got the glory. You're going to support the teams who've got the Cristiano Ronaldo playing and Kaká playing and the glamour players. He is now starting to realize that winning in football and having big deep pockets is not the be all and end all in sport. And I think you can see him maturing, I guess, making his own kind of analysis of what sport is about.
Yeah, and I think I've been a little bit more proactive with my kids than you, but I mean, I've also had the fortune that they're both coming up football wise when the two clubs, the one I grew up with the closest and the one that snatched me a little later in life, Sturm Graz and West Ham, had reasonable successes for the club's history. So there's something exciting there to go on and vibe. I'm thinking of another before this turns into a parenting advice podcast. We should do this once. Actually, pedagogy of raising your kid right.
Son las 12 ya. Esto va a comenzar. Estoy con Superman. Estoy con los petas. Mi equipo está al sureste de Madrid. Vallecas y me hace feliz. Vamos, Rayito. Vallecas está contigo y todo Madrid. Welcome, Vallecas.
Another mural that comes to my mind and sheds some light, I think, on the other half of the earlier years I'd like to talk about a little bit, is another Bucaneros mural. It simply says working class, white letters on red ground. We've covered the local collection a little bit. What's with the class consciousness and that working class aspect of
I think it's
from its founding, and how much of it would you still notice?
I mean, Vallecas is a working class area. I think if you take anybody from any part of the world and get them to spend some time in Vallecas, and they'd say, okay, sum it up for me. How would you summarize this neighborhood? They would say, yeah, it's a down to earth. I think blue collar is what they use in the US. No, it's a working class area. It's kind of like, there's no glamour here. There's no opulence. There's no obvious visibility of, extreme richness. And obviously the working class thing. I mean, West Ham kind of adopted working class a little bit with the two hammers thing as a kind of a, as a badge of kind of industry and kind of simple
shipbuilders is where it comes from.
So I mean, I think it's a badge, and I think a lot of supporter groups, not necessarily in Spain but around the world, like using English language references. England is still seen as the kind of the home of football, and there's still a lot of respect towards English football fandom, I guess. And working class, it fits in nicely, and it's an easy fit.
Yeah,
and it's true at the end of the day. I mean, it's not a fallacy. It's Vallecas is a working class area, but it's a badge they wear. It's a badge of honor. It's like, we are working class and we're proud of it.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Makes sense historically and contemporarily. Now, this is going to take us a long time, but can we run through the long list of titles and successes in the history of Rayo Vallecano since those founding years? I know it's a long list. They've won a lot, haven't they, Paul?
They did win the second division title a few years ago, I think. I mean, they've right. Nobody supports Rayo for glory, Philip. I mean, if you move to Madrid and you want a team who you want to see lifting Champions League titles and Copa del Rey titles and that, don't go to Rayo. Don't go to Rayo.
Yeah.
You can go to the Bernabeu or even the Metropolitano. But no, I mean, people get on board with Rayo for different reasons, and glory hunting and success certainly is not one of the reasons why you support Rayo.
And there isn't ever a big successful period. Sometimes these clubs have like a stretch of 5-6 years where there was some title, and it's this glorious past they're looking back to forever. Rayo doesn't really have that kind of period either, right?
And we were talking earlier on before we started recording about US sports, and I was saying that there's more parity, I think, in US sports, and a lot of clubs starting out in whether it be NFL or the NBA, they genuinely believe that they can win the title. They genuinely believe that they have options of competing or making the playoffs, or some of them may say, we want to get into the playoffs. That's our ambition. Rayo's ambition is to survive, and when I say survive, I mean survive in the top flight. That's the first objective. Anything else over and above that is a bonus. If they can maybe hover around a European place, if they can make a good run in the Copa del Rey, that's seen as, way and above kind of average expectations. And we reached the Copa del Rey semi-final a couple of years back, and that was seen as, a huge achievement, because it was the first time since the 70s that Rayo made it to the last four of the competition. But yeah, I mean, there's no, the Rayo's trophy cabinet is got plenty of dust and is quite bare.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's no glory.
It really is the yo-yo club story for much of the history, right?
Yeah.
In terms of European appearances, 2001 stands out.
Yep.
Rayo doesn't actually qualify through the league. If I got this right, they qualify there. A fair play spot.
Yeah.
To the UEFA Cup, which is a forerunner to the Europa League. You were there when that season happened, were you?
No, this was 2001. I was there. I moved in 2003, so this was like a season or two. But no, I mean, when you talk about past glories, and we talk about we won the cup in 1911 or 1908. No, Rayo and Rayo fans, because a lot of Rayo fans, contemporary Rayo fans, remember that, and they went to the games, and they look back, and certainly the game against Bordeaux, which was maybe in the round of 16 or the last day, or it was one of the latter games in the competition. Rayo fans went to Bordeaux, and they still have a very strong relationship with Ultramarines, who are the ultra group from Girondins de Bordeaux, who, for me, that was the sad story of the summer, of seeing that club, once one of the most decorated clubs in France, lose their professional license. And
yes.
And that's another day's podcast, club ownership.
I think it is actually, and I'm working on something there. Yes.
Yeah. That's for me. I mean, football really has a problem if it cannot conserve. If French football in this particular case didn't see the warning signs for Bordeaux's plight, then I think we do, football as a collective, we as part of the football family, we need to do more. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, Rayo beat a team from Andorra, I think. Then they played Viborg, they played Molde, they played Lokomotiv Moscow, they played Bordeaux. Then I think we lost Alaves in the semi-final.
It's the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
You also could have drawn Porto there. Be interesting for you.
And that was the year Alaves went on to lose to Liverpool in the final, if I'm not mistaken.
To Liverpool, you're correct. Yeah. Yes, I had to look this up. You know that. Yeah.
But it's again that kind of that year is still talked about, and there's still commemorations of it's been the X anniversary of the game against Bordeaux, and there was, some of the fans reissued commemorative T-shirts with the cover of L'Equipe the day Rayo beat Bordeaux, and it's still talked about in kind of with a lot of reverence that particular season.
And what's the buzz around James Rodriguez these days?
To the Rayo website at the moment, I defy you to find any reference to James Rodriguez.
Seriously, you're not making hay of it, really? Okay.
No, I mean, you go into the. Let me just. I'm actually going to do this live. I'm just going to the Rayo club shop, and just to kind of back up my own guesses on the Tienda Online. At the moment, on the Tienda Online, you can buy last season's shirt. There is absolutely zero reference to James Rodriguez. Zero reference. The new shirt is not available. I mean, we will touch on this in a while. But
since you mentioned it already, president, current leadership. This, I assume, is not your only critique there. Who is leading the club right now? And also structurally, could you briefly tell us how this works in Spain? On this podcast, we've talked a lot about 50+1 membership-owned clubs. What's the system like in Spain? And what is Rayo's particular situation right now?
Okay, Rayo, before Raul Martín Presa, who's the current president, took over the club in May 2011, the club was owned by a family called Ruth Mateos, the Ruth Mateos family, who were a businessman. He was very successful, had a lot of dairy products. He was famous for having 17 children. He was a bit of a character, the main Ruth Mateos guy. And then he eventually gave the reins of the club over to his wife called Teresa Rivero, and she became the president, and the stadium was briefly called El Estadio Teresa Rivero. His company was struggling financially, and that impacted on the players getting paid and just the kind of cash flow situation with Rayo, and basically he needed to sell. He needed to get out of football because it was just taking up too much of his time that he didn't have, and his family's time, and so he sold his shareholding, which was 97% of the shares, to this individual called Raul Martin Presa, who is apparently his background is in the printing game. He's from the north of Madrid originally. He's always claimed to be a long-standing Rayo fan, which nobody can prove or disprove. He took the reins of the club in 2011, and he was seen at the time as a breath of fresh air. It was like, we've a new owner. This guy will take things seriously and at least pay the players. The club had a massive debt at the time too. They just accrued a huge amount of debt, and a lot of people hadn't been paid. And the players at one point had to pay for the coach travel for away games because the Rayo's accounts were frozen. I mean, it was a mess. And the fans did their thing too. The fans had buckets before the game to try and create some money, and they created a bank account where fans could contribute to try and pay not just the players' wages, because I think we all knew that the players were well paid, but it was the groundsman, the secretary at the office, the guy who picks up the phone in the ticketing office, the kind of the backroom staff. They're the ones they're the ones in the shadows who don't make the headlines, and they're never they're not the glamorous side of a football club. They weren't getting paid either. So Raul Martin Presa takes over the club, and initially nobody has really any feelings for or against, but then over time, a couple of episodes started to happen, and he started to kind of clamp down on the fans about what the fans could do and couldn't do, and just started to make life a little bit less easy than it had been before. And over time, you can see that he sees the fans as an inconvenience. He sees the fans as kind of like a problem child that he doesn't want to deal with, and it's just kind of like, and he just puts up barriers and puts up more barriers. Okay. There's a Spanish journalist called Carlos Sanchez Blas. I don't know if he's covered Rayo for years, and he has this analogy that the rest of us were driving along in our car, 4 lanes, and we're all going this direction, and then coming the other way is Presa in his car, and his attitude is like, look at all those people going the wrong direction. It's like he's always right and everybody else is wrong.
Yeah,
and this is his mentality, that it's like, the fans are always wrong, and but I know what the best thing for Rayo is. And
so it's more personal. The end game here is not to completely sanitize the club, move it out of its neighborhood, or are some of those desires part of this too?
For me, there's one reason, and it's economic. I mean, having a football club in the top flight in Spain is a very lucrative proposition in 2024. The money flowing into a club from television deals and from player transfers is extremely interesting, and that's why he's at Rayo, because it's a business opportunity. But then there's the paradox where he's happy to take those channels of money, but not then look at the James Rodriguez opportunity and think.
I was just gonna say, yeah, he's clearly not utilizing all the potential. Then, if it's mostly about the money, is there a realistic scenario to get him out?
No. I mean, the fans have done everything within the confines of legality, and there's also been 1 or 2 things that have kind of borderlined on. He's had a lot of abusive chants. He's had a lot of direct insults, which are never nice. There's been a lot of kind of veiled threats, but I don't think anything has gone on to kind of anything too severe where he could kind of mount a legal say, I'm being subjected to an excessive amount of abuse here. This is the sad reality of things at Rayo at the moment, Philip, whereby the only reason that I could see Presa deciding to leave would be Rayo dropping 2 divisions where the money simply isn't
there to be made anymore. Yeah. Yes, reminds me of periods I've known at Sturm and part of the presence at West Ham as well.
El Rayo Vallecano siempre que juega derrocha valentía, coraje y nobleza. En todos los partidos al corazón y el pecho ambicionando ser el mejor. En triunfo de la mano nadie puede arrebatar al Rayo Vallecano cuando sale a volar.
What does the other side look like? So organized fans, the supporters as an asset. Who are these supporters, and what's happening in the stands and behind the scenes in Rayo's fan culture?
I touched on earlier on, Philip, when we were talking about the Ruiz Mateos era in football, when obviously the players weren't getting paid, the club weren't getting paid, the club were in financial dire straits. This was the first time that I ever took interest in how the club was being run and paid attention to governance. Because I think as football fans, I mean, there's no good football fan or bad football fan, or the right way to be a football fan or the wrong way. There's no, everybody has their own football fandom, and it's their thing and it's their special thing, and that's it. But for the first time ever, I've always considered myself a lifelong football fan. I was born in Derry City on my team, my hometown team. When I lived in London, I used to go and watch Queen's Park Rangers. I've always enjoyed football, but I've never really paid attention. And this is something that happened with the advent of Supporters Direct in the UK, where clubs were being badly run and clubs were going out of business. And Supporters Direct kind of came together in, I guess the early 2000s as a kind of a collective to try and prevent clubs from going out of business. I think Exeter City were involved, Wycombe Wanderers, lower league clubs in England. Portsmouth had problems with ownership, Swansea. And these were groups who came together and kind of tried to protect clubs, or tried to save clubs, or tried to even buy out the club and manage the club itself. And it was with the Rayo experience here made me sit up and realize I need to pay attention to what happens at boardroom level, not just to what happens on the field for the 90 minutes. I need to know what's going on at Rayo. I mean, we have a right to know as supporters. A right to know. We don't have a right to know, but we do at the same time. We're invested emotionally. Some of us are invested economically. Some guys are even shareholders. But it's in our interest to know, I think, is probably the way to phrase it. And I spent a lot of time getting involved with there's no real governance body kind of in the way that in England you have this FSE, Football Supporters Europe, and things like that. They weren't really that prominent in Spain, but there was kind of like green shoots of clubs having problems and fans starting to ask questions and fans forming groups together to kind of tackle the club ownership models and things like that. And this is all happening in kind of like the late 2000s, where football fans kind of finally started to pay interest as to what is happening in their clubs, and to ask questions and to kind of, like I say, investigate.
Are there any organized groups here in England? I'm thinking of supporter trusts. Any equivalent here that organizes fans?
In Spain, there's a group called FASFE, which is an acronym for basically it's a football supporters kind of governing group. But again, it gets occasional grants from UEFA, but it's all run on a volunteer basis. And I don't know if you know, and you can only go so far with groups of volunteers because everybody has to put food on the table.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really have any sort of excessive clout. Within Rayo, there's tons of fan groups. There's Peñas, which is kind of organized fan groups, and the Peñas themselves, they've kind of got a collective where they meet and they kind of try and make sure that we're on a similar direction. And these are the guys who put together, the collections for the players and backroom staff when Rayo were struggling. And they have a strong voice, but it's still ultimately the voices of fans. It's not, they don't have any say in the running of the club. They can cast their opinion, and obviously, with social media, everybody's got an opinion.
Yeah.
As a collective, they're just supporter group, Philip, and they don't really have any influence. I was going to say they don't have any influence, but then we can talk about the Roman Fathulia case where they quite clearly did have influence.
What was that about?
This was a player who was going to move to Rayo in 2017 from Real Betis. He's a Ukraine international, and Rayo fans saw enough what they believed documentation, shall we say, that they were convinced that he was a far-right sympathizer. And they were adamant that they do not want to have, in what they believed, a Nazi playing for their team. They didn't want to support a person with that ideology. So Suya was signed, and as he was going through his medical signing contract, there was banners outside the training center. The fans were there, basically saying "Thuthuya not welcome." "Thuthuya not welcome" was the kind of the banner that was used. It was, again, in English, not in Spanish, to kind of reinforce that point. And ultimately, the deal floundered. Thuthuya said, "I'm not going to come here if I'm not welcome. Yeah. I don't want to come to a team where I don't feel welcome." And he went back to Betis and couldn't play for Betis, and because the deal was already kind of halfway through, and he was kind of like in limbo. Okay. So when I say fans have no power, yes and no.
Okay. There's no structural part in the system that would, at some level, pit fans with or against owners, but it's this informal power.
It's an informal power, but it's also a power where the club will talk to members of. There's a thing called Agrupación de Peñas, which is like a supporter group, and they have like a chairman or the head of a figure who can speak on behalf of the fans, if you like. And the club does occasionally meet members of that group and members of the other fan groups. And there was a particular instance in 2018 or 2019 when Rayo got relegated, and normally a football club, when they get relegated, they will lower their season ticket prices. Rayo decided to increase season ticket prices and to remove Rayo Femenino, which was always part of the package.
Yeah.
You buy your season ticket, you also have the right to go and watch the women's team play. Mm-hmm. They decided they wanted to move that out and sell that as a separate kind of package, if you like. And the clubs, the fans said, okay, that, at the moment we're not going to renew. Let's boycott the season tickets, blah, blah, blah. The club then eventually said, okay, let's meet and discuss it. And so a representative from the fans went along to sit down with members of the club. The club showed up 90 minutes late, which is tells you a lot about how the meeting. And literally just went through every point and kind of went, point number 1, no, we can't do that. Point number 2, we can't do that. Point number 3, no. Point number 4, Point number 5, no. Anything else?
Okay. Yeah.
So they met with the representatives, but they didn't negotiate. There was no negotiation.
Right. In that mix somewhere fits the stadium question right now as well. What's the future of Rayo's home look like, and what do fans have to say about it?
The message seemed to have changed. I mean, obviously, towards the tail end of last season, sort of April, May, these kind of mutterings came out, and rumors were coming out about Rayo possibly moving, and it would have cost too much because Rayo don't own the stadium. The club do not own the stadium. The Madrid Council owns the stadium and rents it to Rayo.
I see.
That's important to establish from the outset. So the stadium is not Rayo's property. They rent it from the city council. And so Rayo's not attached to the stadium. I mean, they don't have to be there. But I mean, taking Rayo Vallecano out of Vallecas, it's just, you can't do it. You can't just take it. And it's not like the Chargers or the Oaklands or the Oakland Athletics who are moving to Las Vegas, and that just doesn't work in European, as you know. It just doesn't happen. So there was talk about the possibility of the club moving to a destination unknown.
So not even close by. It wasn't clear that, we'll move one suburb over.
Nobody knew where they're going to move. I mean, Vallecas is quite packed as it is. I mean, there's not a lot of big, expansive space around there where you could move a football club.
Yeah, the stadium is very central. It's one of these nice urban settings, houses all around.
The stadium is unique in Spain, and it's very iconic. And I think it's that, and that's what Rayo is special for too, Phil, because Rayo is a neighborhood club.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the likes of, say, Malaga or Celta Vigo or Osasuna. They represent cities. Rayo represents a neighborhood in the capital city, but it's a neighborhood. It's unique and it's iconic. And it's another one of the quirks that attracts people to Rayo, because it's the idiosyncrasy of what it represents to is different from the rest of top flight clubs in Spain. So yeah, nobody knew where they were going to move to. I mean, there was all sorts of speculation. It's going to be X, it's going to be Y, but ultimately the fans were unanimous. Like wherever it is, it's not going to be Vallecas. It's not going to be the heart of Vallecas, because taking Rayo out of Vallecas, and you really cut the heart out of the neighborhood there, because every second week, this small part of Madrid is beamed into people's homes across the world. And it exists, and it's really important. I mean, it's the kind of the beating heart of that neighborhood. And on match day, it's kind of, there's a game on because there's so much commotion, there's coming and going, and it's the energy around the place is tremendous. And it's all generated because of the football club and the games, and all the derivative businesses from that. Things have changed since the start of the new season, though. That whole kind of groundswell of Rayo going to move seems to have changed, and now the message from the Madrid government is, oh no, we're going to actually invest in remodeling the stadium. I mean, the stadium needs a huge amount of investment. I mean, the stadium is quite dilapidated. I mean, there's a very thin line between having old school charm and being literally unhygienic.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment, there's too much of unhygienic, and this is not safe, and this is, and Rayo needs to sort of move into the 21st century. I mean, it is a stadium from the late 80s and 90s, structurally and physically, and in so many ways.
Yeah, oddly reminiscent of 1860 Munich.
Yeah, the
also moved out of its neighborhood into a big arena in the suburbs where Bayern played. Now back home, also dealing with a very shady investor where nobody quite knows what they want out of this club, and the stadium that they play in is owned by the city and is begging for renovations all the time. Okay, so the city council has committed itself now, or are those just rumblings?
At the moment, I mean, there's been nothing sort of put down in paper at the moment, but the latest kind of messages coming out of the city council is that there's been a rethink, and they realize that the stadium needs investment, and that is the latest message. So the whole area of kind of Rayo being forced to move somewhere else has kind of been put on the back burner. I think there's enough confidence that this is going to go through and it's going to materialize, and there will be some sort of development work starting, they say, next year, 2025. So yeah,
okay. I mean, even with development, it's the kind of stadium and in the kind of space that it's in where I have a hard time imagining it radically altering its face. There's probably only so much that you can do in that spot. Yeah. So fans would be open to renovations in the location?
I mean, I am not a structural engineer or any kind of an architect expert. I imagine that the fondo you could increase in size, but you're talking another 1,000, 2,000 seats, maybe building it up. Again, this is just looking at what I think could happen realistically. I mean, an architect may come along to me and say, no, you can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. The other area behind the goal, you could possibly put a little stand in there. But again, that is literally on the side of a road, which leads onto flats. So it's kind of like Chelsea have a similar problem. I mean, Chelsea obviously have a bigger stadium, but Chelsea want to move from, I don't know, like 40 to 70,000, and they have to buy up the land, and there's a lot of people who don't want to sell, and there's a lot of issues, and that is a problem with inner city stadiums that have been built for a particular era.
Yeah,
and time moves on, but at the same time, I know with confidence, Philip, that if Rayo were to get relegated to the second division, we'd be looking at crowds again of 7,000, 8,000, 9,000. I mean, the current capacity is like 14,000, and most home games pretty much sell out, as good to are as close to selling out. But I do know that if we were in the second division, and that all you need to do is look at our kind of graphs and stats over the years, and Rayo have never spent more than I think 5 or 6 years in the top flight. So at some point in time, we will inevitably drop to the Segunda. And then I think when you drop to the Segunda, you're looking at crowds dropping to, sub 10,000 crowds. So do you need to expand? I don't know.
One group in the crowd that always is there are the Bucaneros. We already mentioned them literally Buccaneers. Is it something decidedly different, perhaps, in how political it is from other clubs in Spain? What sets the fan culture at Rayo apart?
Yeah, I mean, fan culture. I mean, again, there's enough material to dissect fan culture in Spain and the political elements that kind of filter into fan culture in Spain that have references back to the political makeup of Spain and the way Spain is kind of constructed with these 17 autonomous communities, each with their own very strong identity. I mean, it's that, like I say, there's enough material there for its own podcast. Buccaneers are the Rayo Ultra group, very active politically, very much on the left, very committed to the club and very committed to a set of values. And we'll always know that at the end of the day, we may not be the most glamorous club. We may not be the most glamorous neighborhood. We may not have a trophy cabinet that's bulging, but we have got a strong set of principles, a strong set of values, and we will defend those fervently. And I think that's how you define Buccaneers. They're very organized, a very, very, very good collective, but with a very clear view of what their role is within the club and within the community and within the sort of the Rayo fan ecosystem, if you like.
Are there other ultra groups or other streams of fan culture that go into that terrace?
Not really. I mean, within Buccaneers, you've got sort of there's guys who do like the graffitis. There's guys who are involved in, say, the merchandising side of things. There's guys who probably organize trips and things like that. But yeah, Buccaneers kind of oversee. It's just one umbrella
collective.
Group.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, there's no sort of subgroups and then you've got Buccaneers are an ultra group, and then you've got fan groups who wouldn't associate themselves with the ultra movement. And these are just peñas. These are like fan groups who meet together to go to football, and they maybe have lunches together. And but they'd also be active in terms of their fandom. I mean, they're not passive. I mean, they may not be located in the end behind the goal, but they're every bit as vociferous in questions relating to Pressa and Pressa's ownership and social issues too. If there's problems in the neighborhood, if there's a swathe at the moment of evictions going on in the neighborhood. Obviously people can't afford to pay their mortgages.
They're gentrification we talked about earlier too.
Yeah, and they're getting kicked out, and they will always be very vocal on defending and even mobilizing to defend these neighborhoods against the law enforcement agencies when they come to evict. So
okay,
yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I think people don't realize, that Rayo's fans are so kind of self-connected in with issues of the neighborhood, and the football club is just a kind of like an added-on element to the whole mix.
Yes. Any friendships, particular kinds of rivalries?
Yeah, I mean, the friendships, Rayo's Ultras friendships are generally conducted on political lines. So the two strongest friendships they have are with the Cádiz Brigadas Amarillas,
yes,
and Deportivo La Coruña's Riazor Blues. They have strong relationships, positive relationships with Athletic Club, Real Sociedad Osasuna, Alaves, all the Basque teams, Tenerife. Again, these are generally the strength of the relationships, or the kind of the harmonious kind of atmosphere is generally conducted by political affiliations with the ultra groups.
Is that international as well? Any connections there?
Yeah, they have some I mean, they've got their friendships with Herakles in Greece, with Bordeaux, Ultramarines in Bordeaux. There's I think they have friendships with Werder Bremen, the Werder Bremen group, and St. Pauli.
Yeah.
Also connection with Green Brigade in Celtic.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious candidates when you think about left-leaning fans,
organized left-wing supporter clubs
across European football. The Buccaneers will have some sort of relationship, but it's a very tight-knit relationship or a good relationship. But again, the political line is generally the thing that kind of conditions that relationship.
Do you still The support behind the goal has always been there, but right now other areas of the stadium are getting pretty full as well, right? It's hard to get tickets sometimes.
Nearly impossible to get a season ticket, and I'm waiting. Waiting for people to have spare season tickets, or occasionally when tickets go on sale, having to queue. And this is one of the other points that is, we're in 2024. Rayo don't have an online.
So you have to literally go down, queue in front of the
you go down, you pay your 25, 30 euro, and you get a physical paper ticket, and that's your ticket. In this day and age of digital ticketing and online ticketing, Rayo, and again, this is one of the many issues I have with the ownership. That's not acceptable in 2024, where fans have to queue, and to get a season ticket, fans have to queue overnight. And there's these scenes of, you see fans with their deck chairs and with their little kind of snack boxes queuing overnight.
Yeah,
generally in the month of August, so it's quite warm and it's quite nice and it's not cold. But you can't,
Wow.
You can't put people through that. But football fans, we're just not rational people.
Yeah.
And we'll do it. We'll queue up, and we will queue up to do these things, to go and to get our fix of football, and to go and see the team that we love. And we can't just kind of, I'm going to go and support Getafe, or I'll support Leganés. No, it's like you support.
No, you can't just no. You can't. So season tickets are capped in the stadium. There's like a
they always have to have a small percentage of tickets left for general match day sale. A small percentage goes to the away fans, and then there's always a small, we're talking about hundreds that go on sale for fans. And then, for those big games, just forget about it. If you want to see Rayo against the bigger clubs, Athletic Bilbao, Real Sociedad, Madrid, Barca, you either need to have very deep pockets because you're looking at big prices, or be prepared to just queue for hours. And for the first time, you're seeing at Rayo, ticket touts, which are called, what are they called in the US? What do they call them? What's the word in the US? Hustlers, when they're like secondhand. Hey, you want to buy a ticket, man? I've got tickets. And
yeah.
In the US.
I don't know the exact term now either.
It's not hawkers. Anyway, and I've never seen that. Now you're seeing that there's the demand is outstripping supply. And obviously people realize that they can make a bit of money from it. So, this is, like I say, it's the ever evolving situation with Rayo and a top flight football club in Spain.
Yeah. So we may not want to have more tourists show up in Vallecas. But if somebody's listening to this and they're about to head to Spain, why would you say they should give a game at Rayo a shot versus the big ones? And what kind of football fan does it take to really appreciate the vibe of a match day in Vallecas?
Yeah, I think the tourists that generally frequent Rayo are people who are there because they've tracked Rayo down. They know what Rayo is about, and they know what they're going to get in terms of like a match day experience. So many times when I moved to Madrid originally, friends of mine would from London or from Ireland would want to come over for the weekend. They're like, I want to go to see Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. And I would always say, right, I'll take you to the Bernabeu, but we go to a Rayo game too, because Rayo are on Saturday, Madrid are on Sunday. And they weren't just trying to curry favor or just be nice. They all to a man came back and said that the match day experience at Rayo is just on a different level. That the 11,000, 12,000 fans in Vallecas generate more noise, are far more passionate than the 72,000 or 75,000 at the Bernabeu. And it's a different type of fandom. It's just the only way I could compare it, if you go and see a band play at a small spit and sawdust kind of bar, and it's like sweaty, and you can see the musicians, and you can kind of see their sweat, and there's that intimacy, and you get that at a Rayo game because there's no bad views in the stadium. Wherever you are, you're going to see really well because it's such a small, compact little stadium. When you go to the Bernabeu, you're in the fourth tier. You're you're miles away from the pitch.
Yeah.
And the Bernabeu is a fantastic arena to watch football. Don't get me wrong, but it's a different experience. And obviously, the Real Madrid fans are. There's so many tourists there. The atmosphere is difficult. There's the fans behind the goal, but it's a bit kind of artificial and a bit kind of, it feels a bit performance. And then the Real Madrid fans have got this kind of like crossed arm approach, entertain us. and there isn't that kind of like level of implication where they're not supporting their team, and they're every bit as quick to make noise in criticizing the referee or criticize their own players when things aren't going their way. With the Rayo fans from minute 0 to 90, it's just 100%, heavy metal noise behind the team. And when Rayo conceded, I went to the Osasuna game Monday, the week before last.
Yes.
Osasuna score, and the noise level is cranked up by the fans. I mean, that's it's the old cliche 12th man.
Yeah.
But it's so true when it comes to Rayo, Philip. I mean, it's like I say, the experience is so much more. Yeah, I guess intimate is the word.
Mm-hmm. Forget anything that we should have mentioned?
Oh, yes, the Oklahoma debacle.
Oh, yes, the American connection. Let's do that quickly. That's quite a story.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously, with I imagine a lot of your listeners based in the US, that's something that will resonate with them.
Yeah.
Where in the year was 2016, Raul Martin Presa deemed it appropriate to launch a Rayo franchise in the city of Oklahoma. And
a Rayo branded franchise. The name actually was Rayo OKC, so it's not just a cooperation club. Yeah.
No. It was a Rayo franchise that he deemed as being a kind of this is you have to remember too where we are. This is a club that doesn't communicate in anything apart from Spanish, doesn't have an English language thing. All of a sudden decides that Oklahoma is where it's at in terms of expansion. So they launch a team. They allegedly inject €3 million of the club's funds. This is a club obviously that doesn't spend a lot of money in buying players, etc., into buying this franchise in the NASL, which existed at the time. It lasted for 1 year. They had issues with the local groundsman, the local businessman who kind of he was like the local face of the club.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was a team there at the time called OKC Energy, who straight away their fans we're not involved with these. And we actually, at the time, we got in touch with the Energy guys. I can't remember the names of the individuals behind the OKC Energy fan club, and they sent us a lot of flags and scarves. So we went down to a game against Athletic Club, and we were like draping these OKC Energy flags around the stadium.
Yeah.
And then the following week, anybody going in with an OKC Energy flag or scarf had to be removed. The security realized that this was this was a play by the fans to kind of show our support to the other team in Oklahoma. So yeah, I mean, it was doomed to failure from day one. It lasted for a year, then it folded, and it was just money down the drain. And yeah, the whole message the whole time was like, oh, it's good for the brand, for the extension of the Rayo brand, we're moving into international markets with the Rayo brand. Yeah, it was a bit of a laughing stock, and it was just it wasn't a serious endeavor.
Do you have any idea why Oklahoma City?
I have no idea. No, I mean, I don't know if that was to do with the NASL wanting a team in that particular market, or the conditions were right where they had a supporter locally in the ground who was, in the Oklahoma area, who was happy to kind of front it up as a project. But it was doomed to fail from day one, and yeah, it did.
Yeah. Despite the lack of trophies, it's a very thick history.
Actually, when we talk about trophies, Philip, and this is my last thing, and I'm sure your listeners are thinking, is this guy ever going to stop?
It's fine. Go ahead.
When we talk about the trophy cabinet, we've obviously talked about the men's team. Rayo women's team back in the 2000s were one of the strongest footballing forces in Spain, winning the domestic league 3 times, and they played in the Champions League. They played the likes of Arsenal.
Yes, there was an era there.
That team now languishes in the 3rd tier of Spanish football. And they have just been abandoned. Their back has been turned on. They haven't been supported, obviously, financially. And again, it's when Rayo fans talk about Presa's management and his accolades as the stewardsman of the club, people get really pissed off when they see the way the women's team has just kind of spiraled into oblivion.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's just one thing to add at the end.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's a sign too of what you said earlier, right? Do you care about the whole club and all about it?
Yeah,
there's a warning sign in there in those stories. There's this. It's a story of strong local belongings, and hopefully also soon a story of self-organization and transformation on that ownership level too.
We can only dream, Philip, and hope that. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, nobody knows. I mean, it's we're dealing with the uncertain future of how the club will transpire. I mean, it's if it stays in the first division, I cannot see this gentleman deciding to pack his bags and go elsewhere. Well, at the same time, I can see why Rayo would be an attractive proposition to a point as an outside investment. It's in a capital city, one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world, or in Europe certainly. But it obviously is limited to its location. I mean, you're never going to get more than maybe 20,000 people in there max on a match day. But again, I think if you want to make money from Rayo as an opportunity, then you look at the James Rodriguez episode and you think, hang on, we have signed one of the biggest Colombian stars in the world. Put that into play. I mean, that will, generate plenty of money, and probably more money than, maybe just match day ticket sales would. So, yeah.
You're welcome. For taking us there, and a little bit of history, a little bit of
improvement. It's been a pleasure, and it's been good to want to come over, get in touch by all means. And,
yes.
And you're in for a fantastic experience. It really is still a really unique experience in European football, to be able to watch a club with so much idiosyncrasies that Rayo has, competing at the top table. It's still, it just shows that it's not all about just kind of big clubs and big money and,
right.
these kind of multi-purpose stadiums out of town with restaurants built on and hotels. And it's still a very, very earthy and authentic experience.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I haven't been. I've never been to Madrid.
Really? Okay,
Yeah. So lots of new things for me as well.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for this introduction and for the walk through the neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you. Very welcome. Cheers.
And that was the promised trip to Spain for Fall Break. Little quiz here. How many theses did Martin Luther nail against the church door at Wittenberg, Germany on October 31st, 1517? 95, that's right. And David Kilpatrick from Mercy University has exactly as many theses when it comes to reforming soccer in the present day. So maybe a little Reformation Day episode there coming up in the last week of October. Until then, be well.